We see a lot of sale of drugs at the time of application, and we'll see it, post-licensure as well. And so one of the things that runs through our minds is real estate is not an easy business, and it's not inexpensive. So when times are tough, we don't get a whole lot of comfort if we're inclined to think that somebody's going to start becoming a street pharmacist to cover their MLS dues. So we have certain controls that we'll put into place. The commission has to evaluate, whether somebody's been rehabilitated, how long ago did this occur, are they a danger? And so when there's times that they're concerned about, is this person going to be able to stay on the straight and narrow? If we give them a license or allow them to keep a license, you'll start to see the commission will require that they have probationary licenses. And that's just a way for us to kind of keep tabs and make sure that they're not out there making meth to, basically buy their yard signs. So, but criminal convictions remain something that it's one of our loves, and because of changes at the federal level, we're going to start to get to do fingerprint-based background checks of appraisers. This one I'm a little worried about because in the last year, the board has revoked one appraiser for sexual assault on a child and revoked his brother for homicide. So, a little worried there. We recently had one relinquish his license who is being actively investigated for the disappearance of a spouse. So, be nice to the appraisers. That's the story. The mortgage loan originators, they are entrepreneurs. You get to see all sorts of activities. We had one apply. He didn't seem to think that it was any issue that they'd murdered somebody, wrapped them in a rug, and dumped their body. We saw it differently. We said, no, thank you. We're not going to license you. But they seem to have kind of an eclectic criminal background in their pool as well. One of the other things that we've started to see within the last year is minimum services issues. And so the commission released a position statement on pretty much the minimum requirements under the license law that a broker has to perform. That was back in December, and it was like it was an epiphany to the industry that they'd never seen it before. It's not new. Those have been in the statutes. The single agent outlines what you have to do. Transaction brokerage outlines what you have to do. And you don't get to start picking and choosing what you are going to do and what you aren't going to do under those statutes. Now, if you're going to do stuff in addition to the bare minimum outlined in the statute, it's highly recommended that you do it in writing and that you actually perform those terms, because we get complaints about that. My broker promised to do this. And usually when we call and ask, well, did you promise to do this? The broker will tell us, well, yes. Okay, well, why didn't you do it? So if you're going to make promises, best bet is put them in writing and fulfill them, because if you don't fulfill them, you've misrepresented something, and that is a violation of the commission license law. But what we're expecting the brokers to do is we expect you to perform the terms of the written agreement that you have with the consumer, exercise reasonable skill and care, comply with the license law, commission rules, state and federal laws and regulations. So you don't, if it's going to violate RESPA, that's where it falls under comply with the federal laws and regulations. So, if you're convicted of a RESPA violation, that shoots you into the commission's world because they can say you didn't comply with federal law. Or maybe it's truth in lending or whatever the case may be. And if you're a single agent, we expect that you promote the interests of your clients with the utmost good faith, loyalty, and fidelity. So it's not daunting what is required in the license law, but what we've seen is we've seen a lot of brokers that do limited service listing agreements where they're only going to advertise the property. And a lot of the times what we hear are their MLS entry only listings. Okay, well, to make this clear, we don't regulate the MLS. That's a private database. I'm not going in there to see how things are being advertised, unless I get a complaint that a broker has misrepresented something, and then we'll probably subpoena the MLS to see what they were representing on that online listing. But we're not going in there to see who's doing MLS entry-only listings. That's only if we get a complaint, but we don't regulate the MLS. With that said, though, advertising requires a broker's license, and as a real estate broker, you get to act in one of two ways. You're either a single agent or a transaction broker. You're not an advertising-only broker. So If you've got a member of the public that's saying, I only want you to advertise this on MLS, that's when you have a chat and say, the Colorado license law requires that I do all of these. And if you don't want me to do all of these, then I'm not the person for you. You can't violate the law just to pretty much meet their needs. And we do continue to see these complaints. We're working with people to get them into compliance, but as we see more and more of these that are substantiated, they're going to go to the commission just so that we have an idea of how the commission would like us to deal with these. One of the other things that we continue to see, and I've seen this my entire time at the commission, the two looming issues that just persist are property management, and the other one is supervision. So we get the complaints against the brokers, and one of the things that we start looking at is the behavioral issues in this complaint tied to supervision? Is this a lack of supervision issue? Because if it is a lack of supervision issue, there's a commission rule that basically says we need to open it up against the employing broker and look at the supervision activities. And within the past year or so, we got a complaint, and it was basically a tip, that there was a broker out there that was targeting monolingual Spanish people and really doing some predatory practices. Well, lo and behold, we look, and it doesn't look like he's really getting supervised, even though his license type starts off with an FA. So we go to the employing broker to find out what's going on here. Are you aware of what he's doing? We've got some really big problems here with how he's practicing. And the employing broker conveys to us that, well, he hangs his license with me and I just collect a transaction fee each time, but he just goes off and does what he wants. That's not acceptable. That's a violation of commission rules. What we're expecting of the employing brokers is that they're going to exercise authority, direction, and control over all of their employed brokers in conformance with the licensing statutes and commission rules. And we've got these expectations not only of the licensed brokers that they supervise, but of the bookkeepers, secretaries, that's kind of an antiquated term, and personal assistants of the licensed employees. We expect that they're going to maintain all the trust accounts and trust account records, that they'll maintain all the transaction records, and the law requires that you maintain those for 4 years. Develop an office policy and periodically review the office policies with the employees. Provide a high level of supervision for newly licensed persons. And that's anybody that has less than 2 years of licensure. Now, for the experienced licensees with more than 2 years, we're expecting the employing broker to provide a reasonable level of supervision. We want them to take reasonable steps to ensure that violations of the law, rules, or the office policy do not occur or reoccur. We want them to provide adequate supervision of all offices operated by the broker, whether managed by a licensed or an unlicensed person. And if you want to know pretty much where the laundry list of expectations are, those are laid out in Commission Rules E29, E30, E31, and E32. Now, we're not seeing this with all of our brokers. We have some that are really great managing brokers and employing brokers. We have some that are not so great. So one of the things that we're kind of considering is we're going to take a long, hard look at the license law to see if we have the authority that with the commission update courses, if we can do one that is pretty much geared specifically for the employing brokers, and then an update course that's geared for the employed brokers, so that we can kind of do a refresher course of the supervisory duties. We're also in the process, in December we'll be taking the brokerage administration course to the commission, because we've revised it a bit at the staff level so that 8 hours of that course is not dedicated to business planning. With the issues that we're seeing on supervision, business planning's great, but you're not required under license law to have a business plan. So business planning will be 4 hours. The other 4 hours is just going to be really more dedication to the commission rules, laws, and position statements so that brokers are fully aware of what they're getting into when they go to supervise real estate brokers. And if there's employing brokers in the audience, my heart goes out to you. There is no way I would employ or be the employing broker. I've got an in-house staff, and I have a hard enough time keeping track of them, let alone being the employing broker of a large brokerage where you have hundreds of agents, and they function as contractors, and they're out there just kind of doing who knows what. So we understand that it's a daunting task to supervise them, but there are minimum criteria and expectations laid out in both the law and the rules that we're expecting to see. With that said, we are also looking at internally if there's a way. So to give an example, Caldwell Banker, huge real estate brokerage, and there's one person that's responsible for it. But they've got offices all over the state. So, and we don't recognize the managing brokers in the satellite offices. When there's a complaint that comes in, we only recognize the broker who the complaint's against and the one on the hook for the brokerage, the employing broker. So what we're looking at doing internally is to see if there is a way that we can start tracking the managing brokers for each office and making sure that maybe we've got a copy of the written delegation of authority from the employing broker to the managing broker to kind of lighten the burden on the employing broker and really kind of make a distinction of, is it realistic to expect one employing broker to know what 1,000 employees are doing every day, day in and day out? So that's something that we're looking at internally to see if we can track. And one of the things, when a complaint comes in, we send out a copy of the complaint to the broker that it's against. We also send a notification to the employing broker. Well, that doesn't help a lot if you're the employing broker of thousands. It would be helpful if we could just pretty much send that complaint notification to the branch manager so that they can address the issue with their licensee. That's the reason that we send those out, is hoping that that will start a dialogue between the supervising broker and then the employed broker about the issues of that complaint. One of the things that we also see is practicing beyond one's level of expertise or licensure. And so one of the benefits of not only having the real estate brokers but also having the appraisers and the loan originators is we can keep a pretty good track of what the different industries are doing when they overstep their bounds. So in December, the commission is going to get to hear a case where it was a real estate broker, and there's some issues with how we practice real estate. But he also negotiated a loan assumption. Okay, when you start negotiating loans, that's not a real estate broker activity. That's a loan originator activity. So when we start to see that, the commission's going to look at the license law issues associated with the real estate broker's license. And then we're going to refer the case over to the Board of Mortgage Loan Originators so that they can address unlicensed activity. We also, one of the things that we've been concerned about, just due to changes at the federal level and changes with the appraisal industry, is we hear that the lenders would really like to use our brokers for BPOs instead of having an appraisal done. Okay, well, so the appraisal license law prohibits a real estate broker from doing a BPO if it's used for a financing purpose. So if you have somebody that contacts you to do a BPO and it's for a loan, run away. Because if we see that, we're going to say, okay, well, no, this isn't a real estate broker issue. This is an unlicensed activity issue for the appraiser program. And with the two types of brokers, the mortgage and the real estate brokers, what we also see a lot of the time is they're giving legal advice. And you're not authorized to practice law with a real estate broker's license. So if you start telling people to stop making their mortgage payments, or basically taking them down the road of a foreclosure or a bankruptcy filing, when we get those complaints, we'll address the issues associated with the particular license, but we will refer that to the Supreme Court for an investigation into the unauthorized practice of law. You don't get a practice law with a broker's license. And I actually caught wind of a broker that testified in court that they were allowed to do that with that particular license type. No. And what we also see is so the commission has approved forms, but it doesn't cover everything that the brokers may need. That does not mean that you go home and just bang one out yourself. That's unauthorized practice of law as well. If you need a form, hire an attorney to draft it for you if the commission doesn't have one. Likewise, you don't get to decide that you don't like the commission's contract to buy and sell and you're going to independently hire an attorney to draft something else. You don't get to do that either. If your buyer doesn't like the contract to buy and sell, or your seller doesn't like the contract to buy and sell, they can hire an attorney to draft something else, but you as the broker can't. We also hear a lot of complaints about banks, particularly the short sales or the REO transactions, about, you know, they really don't have, there's no sense of urgency. Deadlines are not their problem. They're not going to disclose stuff to you, and so we feel your pain on that, but we don't regulate the banks. And I mean, essentially what you're dealing with is they have a commodity that a lot of people want, which is real property at a price below market. And so you have to jump through the hoops, and we all just have to basically put up with their antics. So in the next year, what you're already starting to see, and notification went out today, we're doing continuing education audits. We haven't done broker audits since spring of 2005. I'm a little worried because we do annual appraiser audits, and those are enough to, you know, kind of make us a little leery of what the real estate brokers may look like, you know, 6 years after we've ignored audits. So the plan is we're going to do audits on a quarterly basis, and we're going to do enough audits so that 10% of the active practicing population goes through a continuing education audit. There's a couple things that we look at from the regulatory side that are no-brainers. You got to do your 24 hours of continuing education within your 3 years of licensure. 12 of it has to be the commission update course. You can't duplicate the commission update course. It's got to be a different course each time you take it. You have to have E&O to practice. We have a lot of brokers that will tell us, oh, yeah, I don't have E&O right now, but I'll get it when I get a deal. No. So if you don't have it right now, we need to switch you over to an active status, and you don't get to try to procure business while you're inactive. You have to have E&O to stay active and to practice. I know that we just got done doing an audit of 125 brokers. We started out slow because we didn't really know what we were getting into. And of the 125, about 25% haven't responded. That makes me a little worried because we need to make sure that people are in compliance with their education. But if you don't respond to a commission audit, what we can do is then open up a complaint, and you get that nice E21 letter that says you now have a complaint with the commission. And if you fail to respond to that, none of our regulatory bodies really take it well when you blow them off. So something as simple as a continuing education audit, if the pattern with the commission, if you don't respond to an E21 letter and do what you're required, they have a tendency to suspend your license until you do respond. That's pretty significant for continuing education issues. So if you get one of these, please just respond. Even if you're out of compliance, I mean, we're trying to be reasonable. There's a punitive aspect that we have to do when you're not in compliance, and that's usually a fine. But we'd prefer to deal with it on that level as opposed to you've just totally ignored a commission audit, it's turned into a complaint, and now you're looking at a license suspension. We just don't want to go down that road. You'll be seeing us coming out and doing brokerage audits, the proactive ones that we used to do before we were reorganized. Now, when I went to work for the commission, there were two sections. There was an auditing section, and then there was enforcement. Enforcement was the hammer most of the time, and auditing was kind of the kinder, gentler, let's walk you through your deficiencies and try to get them fixed, unless you had an $80,000 deficiency, and then you got the hammer of enforcement. So we're trying to do a blend because auditing went away. It got absorbed into enforcement. If it's a compliance issue, our goal is to bring the brokers into compliance. If we're seeing like a pattern of incompetency, though, we're going to be looking at getting some education and some other kind of safety net factors into play so that the broker gets on the right track.